Serpent Mound sits inside of an asteroid crater. I don't know how many of you have heard that before. We've had it on YouTube and on TV and every place else. This location is on the eastern edge of the asteroid crater. On the western edge is Serpent Mound. Connecting us to Serpent Mound is a fault line. If you go right out here behind me on Route 41, there's a fault that runs down that road north and south. And then it tees off right here at Woodland Altars, and it goes all the way across the Serpent Mound. The only place on Earth where an asteroid has hit a fault line. Now, I did a tour the other day with an old gentleman. I say old, I'm only 72. This guy had to been close to 90, driving a Lincoln Continental, wearing a three-piece suit, if you will, came here to do a tour of the mound. I said, fine. We took off driving around. Every once in a while, you say, stop, stop. You stop the car, and he'd get out and he'd get his dowsing rods out. Right here in the intersection of Parker Ridge Road and 41, he found a vortex. He did a complete circle, 360, in the middle of the road with the trucks and the traffic going by, and he was out there just having a ball. He says, I found it. Go figure, right? I never knew there was a vortex there. But a lot of people call this a porthole. And I think it's just interesting because it is a natural vortex, if you will, because of the asteroid crater. So the crater, the asteroid that hit here happened 300 million years plus. And that's when our ocean, the Atlantic, the Pacific, all these oceans were one. Apotatus was the name of the ocean. And then we're going back all the way to the Precambrian. We're talking about 500 million years ago. This wasn't even Pangea yet, okay? We were south of the equator, probably closer to the South Pole. The asteroid hit an ocean, and it caused this hole, this, here, I gotta pass this around. This is a bag of what happened after the asteroid hit. And I hope you don't mind my bag, but it's from Kroger's. Inside that bag is a material called breccia. I always tell people to take a piece, but don't eat it. It has cobalt, chromium, nickel, iridium, iron, zinc. So it's a local rock that's been impregnated by an asteroid instantly, goes down 6,000 feet in the ground. So imagine this hole here in the bottom of the ocean, 6,000 feet deep, through solid bedrock. What kind of object was it that hit here? Well, nobody has come up with an answer because you had an ocean above it. We have no idea how that force was magnified to make the hole in the bottom. But it's only 6,000 feet because that's as deep as the mining industry wanted the core drill. It's probably much deeper. But anyway, this material here, we give it away, and it's a great material. It helps to magnify energy. It has, like I say, cobalt, chromium, iridium, and it's like a lot of the elements that are here. And I want to get something clear. A lot of people think that Serpent Mound is a grid point, and I call this a grid point mineral. Okay, it's something that the natives probably gravitated to because it has an energy of its own. It has an unusual energy, being from space, iridium. Just like you buy a piece a certain energy. A lot of people think, well, I get a buzzing in my arm from it. I think it's about new beginnings. I think it's something that you can meditate with, and that the Native Americans, when they came to this point, they sat right on Serpent Mound. What's Serpent Mound made out of? Made out of dolomite. That's another material that's used for increasing intentions. So when I see Serpent Mound, I see people giving intentions up there. It works. We've had many times where we formed circles up there, or had groups. They'll all be concentrating on something. The next thing you know, it's in the sky above you. You're like, how does that happen? Intentions. You're working with the conscious theorem, and it's a good way to communicate. So it could have been a porthole for people to sit and communicate with people on the other side of the earth, on the other side of that grid point. We don't know. Recently, we did something on Blind Frog Ranch, of all places, and they're out in Utah, and it's next to Skinwalker Ranch. And they have, they have these anomalies there. They have the iridium, they have an impact site, they have Native Americans, they have UAP activity, and they can't explain what's going on. Well, guess what? That's going on here. So they came here. And it's all part of tying these places together along a grid. And it's not necessarily the 40th parallel or the 39th parallel. It's more, it's beyond that. And it's not what science wants to even talk about. But we're here, and you can acknowledge we are on a grid point. It's a very powerful place on Earth. And the ancients knew it. They came here for a reason, and we're still trying to figure it out. Were they using this to communicate? Were they using the dolomite? All I know is that there's a fault line that goes across the head of the Serpent Mound. And when you watch Native Americans come here, indigenous people that are elders that do ceremony, they'll walk right to the head of the serpent and drop their bag and do ceremony. But they don't, they feel like this is it. This is where we're supposed to be because they can feel that energy. But they don't need a compass. It's already up there in their head. So that's the cool part about it. But anyway, after this asteroid hit, I would imagine it caused a tidal wave around the Earth, and it didn't cause an extinction. In the scheme of things, astroblems have to be over 100 kilometers across to cause an extinction. So we're not in that area. We're only about 8 kilometers across. At one time, it may have been twice the size because 1,000 feet of our surface rock has been eroded away. So all we have left today is the bowl of the crater, which is 5 miles wide. And the energy, the magnetic anomalies travel around the rim of the crater, and that's measurable. And you can feel it. A lot of people having a rock shop, I feel like I'm the bartender of the alternate universe. Every day, practically every day, people come in. I don't know why I'm here. I said, well, guess what? So it's about new beginnings. And I always tell people, careful what you wish for, especially when you go up to Serpent Mound, because it could come true. And over the years of being here, like I said, I came here in '96. I had many times when I was wondering how I was going to make the car payment or the house payment, and I give it intention. Next thing I know, someone pulls up in the driveway and they're paying my bill for me. It's really weird how that works. And I learned from the natives, the elders, that don't, it's okay to use your intentions for good, but don't abuse them. So I've always been very careful about that. I haven't had to use an intention in a long time. So I feel lucky there. But so going on with the crater, a lot of people, when I first came here in '96, had a knock, knock, knock at the door because I had a little rock shop sign out front. I said, I got to try a rock shop. And 2 guys from NASA showed up. And Hal Provomir was one of them. And he did the rover on the Sea of Tranquility. And he was here to look at the asteroid crater. And at that time, it was called a cryptovolcanic structure. So until NASA came here and said, this is a crater, everybody, all the scientists, all the way back to John Locke in 1832, described it as something that happened from underneath and blew up. So there was no explanation for it really scientifically. So he came here and they were looking for PDFs inside of that little particle I'm sending around, the breccia. And that's just a diameter, a particle the diameter of a human hair. And it has a little shock feature across it. And that shock feature can only be caused by high velocity impact. Well, how do they know that? Well, guess what? They went to the moon. Believe it or not, they went to the moon. And they got these particles because the moon is nothing but craters and breccia material. And they brought it back and they analyzed it. And they said, we're going to find that particle and we're going to tell you that it's an asteroid crater. Well, it took 2 years of scanning under electron microscope, and they finally found it. And it wasn't NASA that found it, it was the Ohio Geological Survey. And the way they found it was they had core drills from 1960 when the mining people came here looking for a cobalt discovery or a mother lode so they could mine it. And they never found anything. So they left their core drills up in Columbus at the Department of Geological Survey. And NASA and everybody started probing around and saying, let's start looking at these core drills. Well, about 3,000 feet down, they found iridium and they found the shock particles that they needed. So over time, I'm talking over 300 million years, these things have dissipated close to the surface. So now they're deep in the ground and they're protected. So the evidence is here, and if it wasn't for the mining industry in the 60s, we wouldn't know this is an asteroid crater because we wouldn't have found those particles. So when ancient aliens interviewed me, they said, ancient astronaut theorists believe that there is iridium at Serpent Mound, and they were mining it. And I said, oh, I didn't say that. But they did. And it's interesting because there are some caves at Serpent Mound, not really caves, there's sinkholes and they're in cross section. And there's no iridium there. It's almost a mile away towards the center of the crater where you actually find it. This is the last thing on the crater. This is called a shatter cone. And I always pass this around, let people touch it because this was formed instantly upon impact. This is 1,000 feet below the surface. This is the Ordovician period, 438 million years old. This rock is found in Cincinnati at the Ohio River and on top of the crater in back of us on Parker Ridge, because on the rebound shock, everything was lifted up vertically and this rock was pushed up and on the surface. And some dumb guy like me come along and said, hey, that's a shatter cone. So what's interesting on the shatter cone, there's a little teeny brachiopod, a flat spot on the top, okay? That's a Rapnosquina. That's the genus of the brachiopod that used to live here 438 million years ago. And consequently, he was cemented in the bottom of the ocean, already stratified with many layers on top of him. And when the asteroid hit, it drove a shock wave down instantly, changing the structure of the rock. And the brachiopod was dead center with that shock wave. And what did it do? It went around the shock wave, or the shock wave went around the brachiopod. So that teaches you a little bit about physics. Energy takes the path of least resistance. Even through 1,000 feet of solid bedrock, it's going to find something that's going to go the other way. So that's kind of a neat thing. But it has a lot of energy, a lot of, oh, I don't know how many thousand people have held that. But it's just kind of neat to share that energy. And that's what we're about. We're about sharing. And I've been like that all my life. Everything I've ever done with fossils and rocks, I was kind of chided into it by a third grade earth science teacher. And he was a paleontologist. And he said, you know, you need to get up and give a lecture to the class. And I'm petrified. I'm a really shy guy, right? And so I said, well, I'll talk about rocks. Nobody knows about rocks. I was a nerd in school. So I started talking about rocks, and I'm still talking about them. And it's interesting because now I used to be the nerd. Now I'm not the nerd. It's funny how times change. What I'm seeing in this whole business of rocks is that COVID actually helped our business because it gave people a chance to sit down and stop what they're doing and concentrate on something else, search out something else. So thank God for the internet. And people started looking at rocks. And now I've got young generations coming into the shop and they're all into geology. And I'm the guru, not the guru, but I am the guru. So we tell them about the rocks and we try to pass that information along. And then the next thing you know, I say, welcome to the rabbit hole. So about the crater, like I say, people come from all over the world. And right now, the state of Ohio is trying to site a museum on one of the rims of the crater so that they can acknowledge it and look over it and have like a little tourist center, which will really help the area because not many people are actually coming here to look at an asteroid crater of all things. But to get the mechanics of it, right outside the door here, there's a hillside. And there's some slabs of rock in the hillside. That's called the Berea sandstone. It's about 320 million years old. It's the last rock on the edge of the Appalachian escarpment that was here at impact. So right next door in that hillside, you'll actually see rocks on like a 45-degree angle. And they slid down off of the top. But what happened, you got to figure there was a caldera or something in the bottom of the ocean, 6,000 feet deep. And it created like a ledge on the eastern side. And as erosion took place in the ocean and undermining the bottom of it, everything on the top slid down and filled the bottom in. So that's what confused geologists since 1832, because they couldn't understand why you can stand at the rim of the crater in a stream and look down, and you have a rock that's 320 million years old, and you can reach out and touch one that's 425 million years old. So the geology is upside down. Well, it's nature's gift. Gravity rolled everything down, and that's two rocks on that hillside that you'll see if you go outside. I'll show them to you. They're actually the angle of the way everything sloped down into the valley and filled this whole bottom of the crater in with younger rocks. So the youngest rock is right out here at 41 and Parker Ridge Road, where the vortex is. And I'm not going to encourage you to stand in the middle of the road, but if you want, you could try it out. But that's the youngest part of the crater. That's 320 million years old, where you'd be standing in the middle of the road. And if you look anywhere around the edge of the crater is what they call a Silurian age, 425 million. The top where that shatter cone came from is Ordovician, 438 million. And then there's also Devonian rock in the crater. And at the time, just after or just before impact, there was an ocean here with giant fish, and they call them placoderms. And they were armored fish, and they were up to 35 feet long. So in the black shales, in the crater, like in the floors of some of these streams where that rock is exposed, you can find parts of these big armored fish. That's kind of cool. It's actually our state vertebrate fossil. Yes. Yeah, that's a glacial thing. I think Mineral Springs is a glacial lake. But yeah, if you ever get a chance, go to Mineral Springs, there's freshwater jellyfish there. They call them medusas. And if you go back, when I was in Sweden years ago, we were actually finding medusas that were 400 million years old. And they look just like the ones today. They're round and they have an X in the middle of their back. And the ones here, they're much smaller, but it still has that little X there. And why have they been here so long? Because they can procreate all by themselves. So they are male and female. So, and that's nature for you. It's just nature at its best, really. So look out, man. Anyway, getting back to the crater, it's just amazing that we can stand here and feel this energy from this crater, and it helps us to communicate with the earth, I believe. When you're here, you're at one. It's very peaceful. We try to create a setting that's safe, and there's no drama. There's no drunkenness or politics or religion. I guess this is kind of a religion, but I'm not going to call it that. I think it's a following and an understanding that we need to succeed in life. And I'd like to take some questions from you guys if you have any. Yes. Because it goes against the narrative that's been put forth in 1990. Well, you're asking why are they trying to protect what they have? Because you have to protect the lie. You have to go on with that narrative. I can't. Well, you think it would. Actually, controversy does. So, I've learned to live with controversy living here because I'm in a Bible Belt and I'm selling rocks on Sunday, right? Hey, I'm an evil guy, right? But you know what? And it took me 20 years to hear that from other people. And, grown-ups would come in, 20, 25-year-olds with their kids, and they're going like, this ain't really a bad place, but mom and dad told us never stop here because it's evil. So it takes that generation to find out, well, what's going on, all these people are in church going, don't go there, it's bad. But yet they never come out and say hi, okay? They just assume that we're witches and we're doing all kinds of evil things. But we're just playing with rocks. That's all of it. Anybody else?
It keeps the rough out of your shop.
Exactly, it does. And the only people that won't come in my shop are the Amish. Because when the crop circle happened in 2003 across from Serpent Mound, the elder King came in our shop, and I never met the guy, but big tall guy, have a big long beard. And they brought their kids in, and as soon as they seen my back panels on the Smithsonian Gallery, hundreds of millions of years, they went like this. with their kids, and they shielded them. And then they turned them around, and he says, I'm here to talk to you about the crop circle. I guess they went down and looked at it for themselves. They want to say, well, you know, because they're into UFO stuff, believe it or not. And he went down there and he said, man didn't make it. He turned around and walked out. So there's your affirmation. There's your confirmation. Because for an Amish elder, the head of a clan, to say, man didn't make that, he's really sticking his neck out on a block. But we were harassed the whole time that was going on. Even the sheriff's department, they said, have you seen any aliens yet? And they were serious. I'm like, no, not yet. We're just seeing what happened here. Yeah. But yeah, and you know, I was always told, well, you didn't see a UFO. And like, I was in the military. I worked with air defense, so I got to see some crazy things on the radars out at White Sands. And they always said, you didn't see that, Johnson. You didn't see that. No, just go on. And so there was always things in my life that pointed towards the sky. My uncle, one of them, my Uncle Art from Roswell. What did Uncle Art do? Well, in 42, he was in charge of the internment camps for the Japanese. And in 43, 44, 45, he became chief of police in Roswell. So my Art Brocious, believe it or not, we'd go out there and visit him periodically, and he'd take me around all these sites where missile technology started in White Sands and McGregor. And it's learning about missile technology and space, but yet he never told me why I was there. He never told me anything about Roswell because he was probably told to shut up. So, but he told me in a roundabout way. And even when I got drafted in the military, you're just dumb kid going into missile technology. How did that happen? I think somebody was pulling a string for me. So you know, it's just, you got to wonder, you know, thank you, Uncle Art. But he opened up my eyes to space and what was going on there. And there is UAV activity around here. There's Sasquatch activity. And I've had rocks thrown at me out of nowhere. Terry has had rocks thrown at her. Circles of people in the creek doing a ceremony have had rocks thrown at them from nowhere. And it's all about Bigfoot trying to get our attention, say, hello, we're here. So I think that's important to keep in mind too, is that they're our brothers. They're always here. They're watching over us, and they know what you're thinking. That's the best part. Anybody else? Good. No.
So the question is, with this asteroid coming in,
Yes.
and then the top down. Right?
Yes.
So do you have any insights as a geologist and the intuitive alternative science guy, who I really trust you, you know, from the core of Mother Earth? Because I just recently learned we know so little about the core of Mother Earth, and that they haven't drilled all the way down. And then, so what's coming from the core and going bottom up and out?
Faults. We have faults here. It's not my fault, but there's faults here. The one running north and south runs to the Greenfield Fault to the north and to the New Madrid to the south at the Ohio River. So it's a system, okay? And then for whatever reason, it branched off and went all the way over to Serpent Mound like a T. And this happened 1 billion years before anything happened here. It was all an ocean. So there was a lot of faulting. If you look at Ohio and the faulting system in Ohio, the way it was explained to me by a petrogeologist, is that Marathon Oil got their start up by Findlay, Ohio. And they pumped over 1 billion barrels of oil out of the ground there. Not many people know that. The whole series of Ohio is nothing but faults that have oil in them. All the way to Nashville, Tennessee, there's trillions of barrels of oil in the ground. Thank God they're not trying to get it out because it's not connected. It's not one big oil field, so it's very hard to find. But those faults are what's bringing up the energy, creating the magnetic anomalies. That, and also when you take a stack of rock, every layer has a pattern. It has a magnetic signature according to the way the planet or the plates are moving. So every time a plate moves and sits in a spot for so long, the magnetics charge that rock, and then it gets more on top of it and it moves again. So when you take and disrupt that line 6,000 feet deep of magnetics, it's going to create an anomaly. So that's what we're dealing with here, our magnetic anomalies. And it's just I think the natives knew that. How couldn't they know it? You know, they said, well, did they come here because there was a crater here? Well, no, they didn't come here. They came here because it was a high prominence above a river, the Brush Creek, which is 3 miles short of being a river. And that was their international highway, if you will, their super highway. That's how they traveled, by water. But consequently, we know there's over 100 of these serpents in North America. Some have been destroyed, some are still here. But it just shows you that the people that came here had an objective to colonize and create a civilization that could be fed. And back in the ancient times, there was more people here than there are now. And that's kind of cool to think about it. So it was heavily populated. Virtually any hill you could go on out here, you'll find artifacts dating back 10,000 years. So, yeah. Yes, sir. Well, now that's hard to say because the elements of the asteroid are here in that breccia. So it must have made contact. It didn't just glance off and go. But I think it. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Huh. But I do know that there are a number of impacts along the 38th parallel across North America. And I think of like what happened on, where was that, Jupiter? Where they looked at the comet coming in and it hit several places as the planet was rotating and boom, 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 boom across the parallel. And so that's happened here. You can follow these impact craters all the way out west. And it's interesting. And I think the natives just gravitated to those areas. And were they using them for communication? My guess is maybe so, because if you look at the different age periods in archaeology, they're all defined by what kind of artifacts they were making. Not only carbon dating, but look at the artifacts, look at their art. And everywhere on the earth at a given time, that artwork appears. How the heck did they do that? They were communicating. And so you get, and archaeologists all over the earth have different terms for artifacts, but those terms is like an address. It dates that specific culture that made that. And if here, I'll pick up an arrowhead here and it's the same thing over in England or in North America, or not North America, but North Africa, or down across California or up into Siberia. These artifacts are all the same, but it's 12,000 years ago. How did that happen? I think they were using their minds, and they had another way of communicating that we've been shut down to, unfortunately. And this is what a lot of this is about, opening us up and trying to figure out, ask questions. That's the most important thing, for sure. I think what we're finding, a lot of the indigenous sites in North America are on a calcium-based or calcite-based mineral, and calcite's used for magnifying energy. So you think the limestones, the dolomites, mudstones, those things are actually where they gravitated to. And they picked it for a reason, and because they could use it in some way. And that's one of those gray areas we're all sitting going, how did they do it? But sooner or later, we're going to tap into that consciousness, and it's going to say, boom, just like Chris getting a song from Creator. You know, boom, there it is. Write it down quick before you forget it. But it's those messages come through, and I've been working on this stuff for years and years and years. And every once in a while you get the aha moment, but it takes years to get that. But it's all about putting your energy into it, and then sooner or later, something's going to be an answer. So I always tell people, don't give up. People come to me and say, well, what should I do with my child because he's interested in rocks? I said, well, help him out, you know, encourage him. That's what my mom and dad did. They hated rocks, but they never stood in my way. They knew what my path was, and they go ahead and do it. So, you know, it's just interesting to bring all that to fruition. Yes.
The geologist as a very specific one say to, Lakes makes my lava flow.
There you go. That's how it flows, for sure. Good. Let's say a couple 100 million years from now, we'll be speaking another language for sure. Probably Mandarin or something, but you know, let's hope we make it that far. Because what I study was, of course, trilobites, and that goes back, 500 million years. And it's just neat to find something in the ground and crack it open and say, hello there. I'm looking into your eyes and you haven't seen anything for 500 million years. What's it like, But it's nice to free these things up. And I also learned, there's another little tidbit, I learned that the things that I work with have energy and that they actually talk to me. And the only time it's ever been proven with a group of people was in 1986 or 1976 on a site in Clarksville, Ohio. And a group of us were on a dig site for about a month. And I was in charge of taking notes and working as well, but I was doing the systematic recording of these organisms as they were coming out of the ground, doing the positions in the ocean. Were they upside down? Which way were they facing? What was it? So the systematic work, I'm writing everything down, and for whatever reason, before I went to lunch, I picked up my notebook and my pencil, and I wrote down 16 inches above the base, upside down, facing northwest, 8.5 by 4.25, Isotelus maximus. Well, we didn't find any big Isotelus on that site. They were all small ones, and I didn't think about it. I put the notebook down, went to lunch, came back, and they pulled a slab out, about a 400-pound slab, and pulled it up on its side, and Johnson, go ahead, crack it open. And I put my chisel in there and hit it, and there was that trilobite that I recorded an hour earlier. And they said, how'd you do that? I said, I don't know. And so other people that I know that have worked in different various fields, their life's work is in it, and that happens to them. It happened to my buddy in the Mojave Desert, the same identical thing. He recorded, he had a dream about a trilobite. He told me about it exactly. It's the biggest one of the, it shouldn't even be there. He's up on the hill digging away, and he starts hooping and hollering. I said, what's wrong? And he said, I just found it. And went up there was the exact trilobite that he described to me from his dream. And it was the biggest one of the dig. How does that happen? Well, it's happened many times, not only archaeology, but paleontology. It's just amazing. So if you want to follow something, follow it, don't stop, and sooner or later it's going to communicate with you. Yes. About what? Clarksville? Well, it was a limestone formation that I was digging in. It was upper Ordovician. We're doing a study on the state fossil, which is the Isotelus Trilobite, which is why I'm here. So my whole thing about trilobites is I've learned to sell them to museums for exhibits so that people can be inspired. It's like the T-Rex of the seas. So a little kid sees this great big trilobite, and then the next thing you know, he's out there digging them up and asking questions. And that's what it's about, promoting the idea that you can go out and do something freely and learn from it and be inspired. And that's, doesn't matter what it is. I don't care if you're planting